Look at almost any rock formation on Earth long enough, and eventually it starts giving up its secrets. That's the strange promise buried inside every cliff face, every desert outcrop, every gray slab pulled from the sea floor. Somewhere in there, pressed into stone for 100 million years, something might be waiting to rewrite what we think we know. We like to believe we've already met the stars of that ancient world. Tyrannosaurus and its bone-crushing bite, Spinosaurus with its towering sail, mosasaurs patrolling the Cretaceous seas like sharks the size of buses. We picture that world, and we assume the picture is more or less complete. 2026 had other plans. In the first 6 months of this year alone, 5 fossil discoveries surfaced that quietly, and in some cases not so quietly, upended settled assumptions about prehistoric life. One rewrote the food chain of an entire ocean. Another finally answered a 100-year-old question about one of the most famous dinosaurs ever found. One came wrapped in a stone coffin on a small Korean island. One had been sitting, unnoticed, inside a fossilized tree trunk. And one may force scientists to admit there's an entire kingdom of life we don't even have a name for yet. Before we go digging, if you're new here, this channel exists for exactly this kind of thing, dragging the strangest true stories buried in the earth back out into the light. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we do this every week and you don't want to miss what's coming next. To understand why any of this still has the power to shock us, it helps to go back to where the whole science of extinct monsters began. England, 1811. A 12-year-old girl named Mary Anning is walking the cliffs near Lyme Regis, the way she does most days, hunting for curiosities to sell to tourists because her family needs the money and there is no other option on the table. She has no formal education. She has never heard the word paleontology because the word doesn't exist yet. What she has is a good eye and a lot of practice. That day, her eye catches something different. Not another ammonite, not another belemnite. A skull, unmistakably, jutting from the rock, but wrong somehow. Too long in the jaw, too large in the eye socket, lined with teeth built for something no living creature resembled. It takes her and her brother months of careful, grinding work to free the entire skeleton from the stone. When they finally do, they're holding something 17 feet long that no one on Earth has ever seen described, sketched, or even imagined. They call it Ichthyosaurus. And with that single discovery, an uneducated, impoverished teenager forces the entire scientific establishment to accept something it had never had to accept before. That our planet once belonged to creatures so alien to us that their existence left no trace in memory, myth, or scripture, only in rock. 2 centuries later, the rocks are still doing it. Start with the ocean, because the first of this year's 5 discoveries breaks one of paleontology's oldest rules. Soft-bodied animals almost never fossilize. No bones, no shells, no hope, usually. The moment something like an octopus or a squid dies, bacteria and scavengers erase it within days. That's exactly why today's oceans can hide something as large as a colossal squid, hunted only by sperm whales, without leaving so much as a rumor in the fossil record for the next 10 million years. Whatever swims down there right now will very likely vanish from history the moment it dies. That's exactly what makes what a team of Japanese researchers announced in April 2026 so remarkable. Led by paleontologist Yasuhiro Iba at Hokkaido University, the team had spent years quietly gathering fossilized beaks, the one part of an octopus tough enough to survive tens of millions of years, since it's the only structure in the body made of anything harder than muscle. Using new digital scanning techniques to pull additional specimens out of Japanese rock that traditional excavation would have missed entirely, they assembled a picture of something that shouldn't have been possible to reconstruct at all, an extinct genus they named Nanaimoteuthis, after Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, where several of the specimens turned up. The math on the largest of these animals is almost absurd. The biggest may have reached something close to 60 feet long, comparable to a city bus, and easily 4 times the length of the largest octopus alive today. The press inevitably started calling it the Cretaceous Kraken, and for once the nickname undersold the animal rather than oversold it. Here's where it gets stranger. A beak alone can't just tell you an animal's size, it can tell you how that animal lived. Under magnification, the fossilized jaws showed heavy, uneven wear, ground down disproportionately on one side, the kind of asymmetry that in living octopuses is linked to handedness, a favored side, a habitual way of attacking prey. That's not simple biting. That's evidence of behavior, of a hunting style refined over a lifetime, in an animal whose entire nervous system is still one of the strangest and most alien on the planet. For decades, the unquestioned rulers of the Cretaceous seas were assumed to be the great marine reptiles, mosasaurs, some pushing 50 feet themselves, sharks the size of great whites patrolling alongside them. Nobody seriously considered that an invertebrate, something without a spine, without a proper skeleton at all, might have competed with them for the top of the food chain. The 2026 findings suggest exactly that. Somewhere in those black, cold Cretaceous depths, a school bus-sized octopus may have been perfectly capable of taking down animals that any reasonable person would have assumed were untouchable. From the deep ocean, the story moves onto land and toward a dinosaur whose real biology, it turns out, we've been guessing at for over a century. Say the name Spinosaurus, and most people picture the same image. A sail-backed, crocodile-jawed giant, famous enough to have gone head-to-head with a Tyrannosaurus in a blockbuster film. What's less well known is how thin the evidence behind that picture actually was. The original Spinosaurus fossils, described back in 1915, were destroyed in an Allied bombing raid on Munich during the Second World War, meaning that for the better part of a century, everything scientists thought they understood about this dinosaur came from old photographs, sketches, and a scattered handful of later incomplete finds. Whether the animal had been a strong swimmer hunting in open water or a wading, shore-bound predator remained a genuinely unresolved argument among paleontologists for years, simply because there wasn't enough material to settle it either way. That changed in February 2026, when a team led by paleontologist Paul Sereno at the University of Chicago announced an entirely new species, Spinosaurus mirabilis, the astonishing spine lizard. The fossils came out of an unforgiving stretch of the Central Sahara in Niger, and the story of how they were found is almost as good as the science itself. Sereno's team first picked up strange, curved bone fragments off the desert surface back in 2019, without fully grasping what they'd found. It wasn't until a return expedition in 2022, when they uncovered 2 more matching crests, that the significance hit them, reportedly in a moment so charged that team members later described crowding around a laptop screen in the middle of the desert, running on solar power, watching a 3D reconstruction of the skull assemble itself piece by piece in real time. What they'd found rewrote the old debate rather than settling it in either original direction. Spinosaurus mirabilis wasn't built like a submarine. Its leg bones were short but unusually dense and sturdy, ideal for wading through mud and shallow water, much closer in function to a heron than a shark. Sereno himself has described the animal as a kind of hell heron, a predator built to stalk shorelines and river shallows, striking down with a long, flexible neck and interlocking teeth suited to gripping slick, struggling fish rather than tearing flesh. The location of the find mattered just as much as the anatomy. This site sat hundreds of kilometers inland from any Cretaceous coastline, in what was once a lush, forested river system rather than a sea. An animal built around hunting fish, found nowhere near an ancient ocean, made the fully aquatic theory very hard to defend. Then there's the crest. Rising above the skull in a single dramatic curve shaped like a scimitar, the bone alone stood close to 20 inches tall and would have been extended even further in life by a sheath of keratin, the same material that forms a rhinoceros horn, or more precisely, according to the researchers, the bony casque on the head of a modern helmeted guinea fowl. Nothing quite like it had been documented on any spinosaurid before. The leading theory is that it existed purely for display, a signal to rivals and potential mates rather than a weapon. And here's the detail that makes the whole discovery feel unfinished in the best possible way. Every bone recovered belonged to an immature animal, a subadult rather than a fully grown one, with a body length of around 26 feet. Scientists still don't know how large a fully mature Spinosaurus mirabilis would have gotten. Some estimates put it in Tyrannosaurus territory. Somewhere out in that same stretch of Sahara, the adult version of this animal is presumably still waiting to be found. Not every 2026 discovery involves a dramatic predator, though. Sometimes the fossil record hands you something considerably sweeter. South Korea has never been short on evidence of dinosaurs. The country is covered in fossilized footprints and nests, tens of thousands of them. What it has almost never produced is bone. The soil that preserved those tracks so beautifully was, historically, terrible at preserving skeletons. Anything that died there tended to rot away in the mud rather than turn to stone, which is exactly why the discovery announced in March 2026, the first new Korean dinosaur species named in 15 years, felt like such a big deal to the small community of paleontologists who work there. The fossil itself, recovered from Afi Island off Korea's southwestern coast, looked at first like almost nothing. A dense block of rock with a couple of leg bones and some vertebrae barely visible at the surface. What made researchers look twice was a small cluster of gastroliths, stomach stones, sitting right beside those exposed bones. Modern birds swallow stones like these to help grind food in a muscular gizzard, and their presence, still tightly clustered rather than scattered by scavengers, suggested the rest of the skeleton might still be intact somewhere inside that rock, undisturbed since the moment of burial. They sent the block to the University of Texas at Austin, home to one of the most advanced high-resolution micro-CT scanning facilities in the world, capable of looking straight through solid stone without damaging a single fragment inside. What came back stunned the whole team. Not just more of the skeleton, but the first dinosaur skull ever recovered from Korean soil. They named it Doolysaurus huhmini, half tribute to Min He, the paleontologist who spent 30 years building Korea's dinosaur research program, and half tribute to Dooly, a scrappy, mischievous green cartoon dinosaur that just about every Korean child has grown up watching. It's a fitting pairing, because the animal itself was tiny and, by every account, almost unbearably cute. Roughly the size of a turkey, about 2 years old and still growing at the time of death, quite possibly covered in soft, downy filaments rather than scales, based on close relatives found nearby. It likely had the soft, gangly awkwardness of a very young lamb, filaments and all. The 40-odd gastroliths in its stomach point to an omnivorous diet, plants, insects, whatever small animals it could manage. A far cry from either a strict grazer or a predator, from something the size of a house pet. The next discovery goes even smaller and considerably further back in time, all the way to a period before true reptiles existed at all. There's a common assumption about how life on land evolved, that early animals ate plants first, and only later, through evolutionary refinement, did some branch off into eating each other. The actual fossil record says the opposite happened. The very first four-legged animals to crawl onto dry land were meat-eaters. Full stop, descended from lobe-finned fish that had only just figured out how to use their fins as legs. Eating other animals is metabolically simple. Eating plants is not. It demands specialized teeth capable of breaking down tough fiber, and a gut complex enough to actually digest it once broken down. Herbivory, in other words, had to be invented. For a long time, nobody knew exactly when. Part of the answer arrived in February 2026, from a fossilized tree trunk eroding out of a cliff face on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. Millions of years of mineral replacement had turned the tree completely to stone and lodged inside that stone trunk, undisturbed for roughly 307 million years, was the skull of a small animal that had apparently crawled inside the hollow log and never left. Researchers named it Tyrannorota herberti, tyrant plowman, an odd, almost poetic combination once you know what it refers to. It looked something like a modern lizard, though it technically wasn't one. It belonged to a now extinct group called Recumbirostrans, distant cousins of the line that would eventually split into reptiles on one branch and the ancestors of mammals on the other. In life, it was roughly the size and shape of an American football, modest by any modern standard, but among the larger land animals of its entire era. What justified the name and the excitement was inside its jaw. CT scans revealed a triangular skull built around unusually large cheek muscles and rows of specialized teeth arranged almost like a dental battery, a grinding, chewing structure seen today only in dedicated plant eaters. That kind of tooth architecture doesn't appear overnight in evolutionary terms. It takes an enormous span of generations to develop, which means Tyrannorota wasn't the first herbivore on land. It's simply the oldest one anyone has found proof of yet. Whatever animal actually pioneered eating plants on this planet came earlier still, and is presumably still buried somewhere, waiting. Which brings us to the last discovery on this list, and arguably the strangest of all, because this one isn't about an animal at all. Picture an empty, ancient landscape, long before the first true trees existed anywhere on the planet. Nothing taller than knee-high ferns and primitive shrubs for as far as you could see, except for towers. Bare, branchless columns that looked like solid tree trunks, standing up to 26 feet tall, with no leaves, no branches, no bark, and nothing rooting them to any known category of life. Geologists first found fossils of these things back in 1843 and gave them a name, Prototaxites, without having the faintest idea what they actually were. For generations, the leading guess was that they were some kind of monstrous overgrown fungus, not unlike the mold you'd find on old bread or a damp basement wall, just scaled up to a size nothing alive today would ever reach. That explanation held for the better part of 2 centuries, until January 2026, when researchers from the University of Edinburgh and National Museum Scotland ran a new kind of test on beautifully preserved Prototaxites specimens from Scotland's famous Reimagining fossil beds. Every true fungus, living or fossilized, carries a telltale chemical signature. Chitin, the same tough material found in the cell walls of yeast, mold, and mushrooms everywhere on Earth. The team compared Prototaxites directly against genuine fossilized fungi preserved in that exact same rock, under the exact same conditions, expecting to find the same chemical fingerprint in both. They didn't. Prototaxites showed no trace of chitin whatsoever, and to make the mystery even deeper, its internal structure turned out to be organized in ways that don't match anything in the fungal kingdom either. Dense, tightly branching networks of tubes and banded internal walls, unlike the anatomy of any known mold or mushroom, living or extinct. The conclusion the researchers reached, cautiously but unmistakably, is that Prototaxites was neither fungus nor plant nor animal. It appears to represent an entire separate branch of complex life, one that towered over every other living thing on the planet for tens of millions of years, dominated the landscape completely, and then vanished so thoroughly that it left no descendants and no modern relatives whatsoever. Whatever kind of life that was, we don't currently have a word for it. We only have the stone pillars it left behind. 5 discoveries. A school bus-sized octopus that may have out-hunted marine reptiles twice its reputation. A dinosaur whose real biology took over a century, and the destruction of its original fossils in a war before anyone finally got it right. A turkey-sized baby wrapped in stone on a small Korean island. The oldest known plant-eating land animal on Earth, hiding inside a tree that had itself turned to rock, and a 26-foot-tall living thing with no name in any of our existing categories of life. And we're only 6 months into the year. Somewhere beneath our feet right now, in rock nobody has cracked open yet, there is almost certainly another one of these waiting. That's the part of this whole field that never gets old. The ground itself keeps rewriting the story on its own schedule, whether we're ready for it or not. If this kind of thing does it for you, let us know in the comments which of these 5 felt the strangest to you. And if you enjoyed the trip, a like genuinely helps this channel keep finding stories like it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.